Domains. You know, those places we hop into every day to beat up a predictable round of monsters so we can slap some resin on a petrified tree to satisfy our min-maxing gambling addictions. Yeah, you know the ones. Now, their purpose from a gameplay perspective is pretty straightforward, but have you ever wondered what they are? Where they came from, or why they exist in the world of Tevat? I mean, just look at these spaces. They're incredible. Ruined towers amidst a sea of violet storms, an underground cave system with crumbling altars, a gorge surrounded by enormous waterfalls. These spaces are massive. But where is this space? Where do we go when we pass through those big stone doors? What exactly is a domain? Now, before we start, let me just say that I would like to distinguish between two different types of domains, plus a potential third. The domains we'll be talking about today are the challenge domains, not the exploration domains, and not the domains created by the Adepti. While I do think they're related, there's enough to talk about that I'd like to save that for another video. So, like I was saying, what is a domain? The loading screen has this to say. It is said that glorious civilizations once covered every corner of the land, above and below ground, in days of yore. Those once glorious civilizations have long perished, and all that remains of them today is the cities and altars they built deep underground. Altars they built deep underground, huh? And a once glorious civilization. Now, where have I heard this before? Ah, yes, from the description of the Spiral Abyss. A massive underground city constructed by an ancient civilization long gone. To this day, the purpose of this underground city remains unknown. So the Spiral Abyss and Domain share a very similar description. Well, that makes sense. Both of them are portals to spaces that look quite similar, so it stands to reason that they'd be connected somehow. But there are other places that share this description. And I want to talk about one in particular. Khaenri'ah. Albedo's fifth story gives us our first straightforward mention of Khaenri'ah outside of the context of the Cataclysm 500 years ago. This excerpt reads, Khaenri'ah was an underground realm, and its natural fauna were few indeed. As such, its alchemy focused more heavily on the creation of life. This art of creation was known as the art of kemia. The only living being we know of that is 100% confirmed to be made with kemia is Durin. Outside of the dragonspine event that took place in version 1.2, Durin's tale is also told through the Skyward Weapon series. Reading through that weapon series brought me to this line. Even the vile dragon born from sin in the ancient kingdom of the Abyss lost its wings to this proud servant of Animo. This kingdom of the Abyss is most likely referring to Khaenri'ah. As we know, Khaenri'ah is where Durin was created, as it was the only place kemia was practiced. Are you with me so far? Okay, then let's recap really quick. Domains, the Spiral Abyss, and Khaenri'ah are all described as being deep underground. Khaenri'ah is further mentioned as being a kingdom of the Abyss, which is also the namesake of the Spiral Abyss. It's a loose connection at best, but let's take a moment to talk about kemia and why I think it's the true link between domains, the Spiral Abyss, Khaenri'ah, and the Abyss. Kemia is a unique form of alchemy developed in Khaenri'ah. While much of its processes appear to be the same as regular alchemy, kemia was different in that it was able to produce life. This is illustrated for us when Albedo demonstrates the art of kemia by making a small branch sprout leaves on command when we meet him in Dragonspine, and in one of his idle animations. Creating life would have been a necessity for the people of Khaenri'ah, because without abundant flora and fauna, it would be difficult to feed their population. This life-giving practice doesn't involve elemental magic, and doesn't require a vision to perform. Kemia and alchemy both draw on another sort of transmutable power, one that was abundant within the barren landscape of Khaenri'ah. This power was likely the power of the Leylines that stretched out from the roots of the Irminsul trees. Yes, the same trees as those we find within domains. These trees grow underground, with roots that stretch down into the abyss and to the ley lines across the world, revealing themselves above ground as leyline blossoms and outcrops. It might seem like a leap, but let's take a look at some in-game evidence to back this up. Specifically, let's look at abyss mages, who we now know of as the corrupted people of Khaenri'ah. I mentioned before that Khaenri'ah did not have access to visions, and yet abyss mages can perform elemental magics. They are unlikely to have delusions either, since those are very recent inventions and would suggest that the Fatui and the Abyss Order are working together, and we know that's not the case. So if abyss mages were human and lack both visions and delusions, then how do they tap into elemental powers? The answer is simple. They carry leyline branches. Yes, the same ones that they drop when we defeat one in-game. They're the only enemy in the game that has them, and if I had to hazard a guess, I will argue that the Abyss Heralds and Lectors will end up dropping a variation of them as well, as I believe the use of leyline branches to perform elemental magic may in fact be an extension of the art of kemia, although the latter there is a little speculation. According to the item's in-game descriptions, they are pulsating with energy no matter how dead the branch. That could allow them to function as a sort of portable battery from which the Abyss Mages can draw power that they then cast as elemental magic. Now, the only non-antagonistic character we know of that practices kemia currently is Albedo, and he's very fixated on dragonspine in particular. This may not be a coincidence, since the history of the city of Solvindignir talks of a silver tree that may be connected to the Irminsul trees. But there's also evidence to suggest that the people of Solvindignir sought the power and guidance of the Irminsul trees from beneath the ground. Guidance might sound like a weird thing to get from a tree, but the tree itself is connected to the ley lines, and the ley lines are known to contain the history and memories of everything that has ever been. To seek wisdom from the Irminsul is to draw upon the memories that are flowing through the ley lines. The people of Solvindignir seem to be aware of this to some extent, as illustrated in the Tiara artifact sets. This is an excerpt from the artifact Prayers for Illumination. Once upon a time, the people of the land could hear revelations from the heavens directly. The envoys of the gods walked among benighted humanity then. The eternal ice had just begun to thaw, and the first fires were still new. It was a time of great prosperity, when all was left in the hands of such heavenly revelations. The envoys of heaven said that the world would soon enter a new and brighter age. This was predestined, the future immutable. But would a day come when such wonderful times might come to an end? To this question, the envoys gave no answer, so the people chose from among them a chief priest, and adorning his head with a crown of white branches, they sent him out into the deep places of the world, to antediluvian ruins and long-buried altars of sacrifice, to seek answers and enlightenment. Now, these tiaras were made from the branches of Dragonspine's ancient silver tree, and crowned the head of the priest, who they sent into the deepest places of the world, where there were great ruins and sacrificial altars. That sounds just like a domain now, doesn't it? especially since a priest would likely visit an altar to pray to the Irminsul for a blessing, which is exactly what we do when we gift the petrified trees with resin and receive artifacts as blessings in return. But each of these tiaras tell the same story, but with slight alterations. Here's an excerpt from the artifact for Prayers for Wisdom. They say that, once upon a time, the people of the land could hear revelations from the heavens directly. Then the envoys of the gods would walk among benighted humanity, and the waters ran dry as thunder first pierced the skies. People enjoyed untold wisdom, and that wisdom was their boon. Their prosperity brought pride and ambition, and the mind to question. So they questioned the heavens' authority and schemed to enter the garden of the gods. And though they had promised to the people divine love, prosperity, and wisdom, the envoys of heaven were angry. For to question eternity was forbidden, for earth to challenge sky inexpiable. So the chief priest who wore the white-branched crown went forth to appease the divine envoys, and into the deep places he went, seeking the hidden wisdom of the silver tree in the ancient capital. An ancient underground capital sounds a little less like a domain and a little more like Khaenri'ah, doesn't it? But it can't be talking about Khaenri'ah, because we have a record from the scribe of Solvindignir that writes, "I've heard of people who are building a new nation without gods. Perhaps they'll have the power to stand against this world." Khaenri'ah is confirmed to be the only known nation without gods, and therefore it would have been a new civilization during the time of Solvindignir. So what was the ancient capital that the priests were visiting? Could there have been multiple abyssal civilizations and Khaenri'ah was just one of them? That seems likely. Perhaps they sought to use the Irminsul to replace the voices of the gods that had forsaken them, as other civilizations may have done before them, while Khaenri'ah instead used them to form the basis of kemia. Such a powerful tree would be in extremely high regard, perhaps to the point of worship. Given how the trees appear within altar-like spaces within these domains, that seems likely. And speaking of altars and worship, there's one rather curious thing I stumbled upon during my research. Now you see these rings hovering above the tree? There are always 5 of them, and I couldn't figure out why until I came across this passage within the Gnostic text, the Apocrypha according to John. The passage reads, Yaldabaoth created 12 archons, giving each a bit of his power. And he placed 7 kings, each corresponding to the firmaments of heaven, over the 7 heavens, and 5 over the depth of the abyss, that they may reign. 5 in the abyss, 5 rings above a sacred tree within the abyss. This cannot be a coincidence. Besides, 7 archons to rule 7 heavens? When there are 7 archons ruling 7 regions in Tevat? Well, maybe not heavens, but if Khaenri'ah and the abyss are far below Tevat, perhaps they are considered a part of the abyss's heavens. Anyway, just a fun little detail I picked up on. It's a bit too early to draw any real conclusions about potentially 5 more archons, but that would certainly make for an interesting twist, now wouldn't it? And one other thing. Remember Hu Tao's story quest? If you haven't played through it, you might want to, because it tells us something about the cycle of death in Tevat. That all souls return not to Celestia, but to the earth. And not at random, but through a domain. Given what we've established thus far, I would like to suggest that the souls of the dead pass through domains. in order to reach the abyss, in order to return to the Irminsul tree, where they will be reintegrated into the Leyline network. After all, Leylines contain the memory of all things. That probably includes people. Such a power seems far more godlike than those of visions and gnosis. Perhaps that power is what Dainsleif protects as the Bowkeeper. Perhaps that is the true nature of the abyss, and the truth of this world that Khaenri'ah understood, and the reason why they challenged the rule of the Archons and Celestia. Perhaps that's what's depicted in the Domain mural, a figure ascending a helix ladder from the earth, watched over by the sustainer of heavenly principles, and ascending beyond the reach of the moons and into the true heavens beyond the grasp of Celestia. And the domains themselves? Mere doorways into snapshots of civilizations once lost in the abyss. Some may lead to Khaenri'ah, some to civilizations we'll never know the names of, held in place only by the power left within the young Irminsul housed there. We may offer them sustenance in the form of resin, and they gift us with memories of a time long past, perhaps carrying the hopes of the restoration and freedom of the abyss along with them. Now, before I end this video, I would like to leave you with a little passage that I stumbled upon while doing my out-of-game research. It reads, "The earth is not the abyss, but our descent into the abyss begins here on earth. It all depends on what we do. We have the ego, so we have our own abyss, which is none other than the special place in us where our ego gravitates to and resides in. The ego cannot reside in our heavens, but in our abyss. We have no other option but to work on ourselves and remove the inhabitants from our abyss, leaving it clear, clean, and illuminated by the light of our consciousness. Perhaps it's finally time for the people of Tevat and the Archons and Celestia to return to the abyss." Let me know what you think. Do you think there's a connection between Khaenri'ah, the abyss, and the domains? Or do you have your own theories? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'm out of here.